Thank you very much for introductions. I'm very happy to be here today, happy to be in Adelaide, and happy to be part of this very important conference. And I'm pleased to give you a short overview of Canadian current practice in area of radiation health and describe some of the key activities we're involved in. Now again, I have to say that following Dr. Thirsk, Mark Savers, Sato-san, and Uri Straube is a tough act. They have already used some of our best slides, so you probably, we only have so many to go around in exploration and cis-lunar mission planning, so bear with me, you're going to see some of the same slides. But I have some others that you haven't seen yet. So first I would like to, and I should, as an introduction, I should mention that since our astronaut, Robert Thirsk, is here, he has given us, as Mark Savers mentioned, his special permission to point out his personal data. In some cases, we do not do this routinely or ever. This is all confidential data kept in their medical files, but we have done exception for this, mainly because he gave us explicit permission to do so, and secondly because of your own involvement and the nature of audience we have and your role in radiation health protection. Okay, so let's go, Ezra, let's start with the first slide. I'm doing it myself. Okay, so very brief history of Canadian involvement in space. It's notable that we were the third nation to launch an artificial satellite in space, 62, and the first nation to launch a communication satellite into space. Our main contribution in the beginning of the space program, International Space Program, has always been robotics, and we provided what's called the Canadarm to the space shuttle. And that led NASA to invite Canadian astronauts to fly aboard the space shuttle. And this was, and because of the invitation, in 1983 we selected our first astronauts, with Bob Thirsk being one of those first astronauts. And then in 1984, our first astronaut, Marc Garneau, flew aboard the space shuttle. The Canadian Space Agency was officially formed only in 1989, and in 1998 we signed into the International Space Station collaboration, and just for your information, that lifespan of International Space Station has now been extended until 2024, and it will probably be extended until 2030. And now, why do we do this? We do this radiation health protection because of our astronauts. In Canada, we do not have that many astronauts. We have had 4 selections to date. And if you can see here, there's Robert Thirsk. He was one of the first group of astronauts selected in 1983, as mentioned. We currently have only 4 active astronauts, and we do not have many missions, because the mission is based on a contribution. Our contribution to the International Space Station program is about 2.3%, so we get crew time accordingly. So we usually get only we had more shuttle missions, but with the long duration missions, we have had only 3 since the beginning of the ISS missions in 2000, and they only happen every 3 to 5 years. Therefore, we do not have the similar infrastructure that, for instance, NASA and JAXA has for radiation protection, because we do not have the frequency of flights to justify it. All our astronauts, our headquarters, Canadian Space Agency, is located in Quebec, in Canada, Quebec, just outside Montreal. But all our astronauts are training in Houston, so they're relocated permanently in Houston, and they train in Johnson Space Flight Center, fully integrated with their American colleagues. Now, another historical moment that we have officially joined the Lunar Gateway that you have heard quite a bit already, so I don't have to explain what that is. Dr. Thirsk and have done a great job explaining the Gateway missions. And also these slides, also you saw from Dr. Thirsk that it's going to be an international, the Gateway missions, the Artemis mission will be international missions, and the Canadian contribution will be the robotics for the Gateway. Also, this is just to show you very briefly that the Artemis Face One, they are going ahead, and this shows you, I guess, the many interesting missions to follow is the Artemis One, which is the first unmanned mission going around the moon, and that will have that radiation payload that Dr. Straube referred to. So it's flying two radiation therapy mannequins. They're actually female mannequins, Helga and Zohar. And one is decked with the radiation protective harness and one is not, and they are full of detectors. So we are actually going to get very good picture of the radiation doses, internal and external, during that first mission. So that's supposed to happen already 2020. And then the first manned mission is going to happen 2022, 2023, plan is to happen. And that really, those first missions, if they happen on time, that shows you if the plan, if the American current plan to land astronauts in moon 2024 will actually happen. And the Artemis Phase 2 is actually then using the lunar base, to plan and start planning the missions to Mars. Yeah, sorry, so here's the right slide. Now back to space station. I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the practical, what do we do for radiation protection for missions for International Space Station. And this is actually a slide taken in 2009 when Dr. Thirsk was in space. His launch was in May 2009, and this was taken in September 2009. So what do we do? First of all, we work very closely with international partners. And as you heard from Dr. Shabers, we have a very close collaboration. We've been working with the international partners since 1998, when we formed the Radiation Health Working Group. So all the planning is done in collaboration with international partners, and everything is recorded in these program medical operations documents. This shows you the structure, the international structure we have, and here is the Radiation Health Working Group that does all the planning for radiation protection activities and answers to the so-called International Space Station Multilateral Medical Operations Panel. And it is the, I would say that it is the plan that this same structure will be used for planning of radiation protection for exploration class mission, but it's not formalized yet. Again, these are the key documents we use, so everything is documented, our medical requirements, our limits, I didn't put the flight notes here, but they are also one of the key documents we use. But everything is documented, the radiation protection planning, how we do it, the LR principles, how it's implemented, everything is in these documents, and they're all internationally planned and signed and agreed upon. Now, when we do radiation planning, we don't only work with international partners, we also have to deal with our own national regulatory bodies and our national legal framework. I don't want to go too much into the detail here, but basically for us it's a federal labor program, and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is the regulatory body. And all the standards and recommendations that they apply are based on ICRP and IAEA decisions. The key standards are the IAEA basic safety standards, and it's notable that they had no mention about astronauts being a special category until 2012, and prior to that it was a joint initiative from Canadian Space Agency and European Space Agency to try to get the astronauts acknowledged as a special category in the basic safety standards, which now is in place. We work very closely with Health Canada, Radiation Protection Bureau, who advises us in implementing the national regulations to the space forum of space. Now, the CSA radiation protection standards, they were based on ICRP, on recommendation by Health Canada, and it's notable that our career dose limit is 1 sievert, and it's the same for all gender and ages as per ICRP 60. All the exposure limits are stipulated in this document, specifically in this what we call Med A and in Annex. Why is it in Annex? Because actually we could not agree on the career limits between international partners, and we only agreed on the short-term operational safety limits. That means that we can operate the vehicle and we can apply the same safety regulations to all the crew when events happen. So, but we could not reach consensus on long exposure risk framework and exposure limits, and this was mainly again due for the national standards that had to be applied. Now you heard from Dr. Shavers quite a bit about the SRAC. So again, our astronauts are located in Houston. We are in Canada, Montreal, and we do not have the infrastructure in Montreal to do active radiation protection support. So we rely on SRAC, and the SRAC basically keeps us informed. They do all the pre-planning for the missions, and as you know, actually I'm not going to go into that because Mark Shavers showed everything that SRAC, Space Radiation Analysis Group, does. And what we get from them is we get basically the predictions prior flights, so we know what is expected, the expected exposure is for our astronauts during the predicted mission. And we receive weekly reports from them showing us the accumulated dose. And of course, the weather report alerts and space weather summaries are received from them as well. Our astronauts wear NASA personal dosimeters, and those are analyzed by NASA and results are placed in their medical records. Again, you already heard about the LARA principle and action limits and the flight rules from Dr. Shavers. So those are applied, and that's how we monitor and make sure that we stay within the limits. And the NASA Radiation Health Officer provides a report of mission exposure and risk estimates, and as you just saw from Mark Shavers' analysis of risk estimates for our astronaut Bob Thirsk. Now, there's a question about biodosimetry. So we're still the only agency that actively does biodosimetry. This is also easier for us because we don't have that many astronauts and it's an expensive process. The standard there is a FIS, fluorescent in situ hybridization, measures stable translocations, and we collect 1 sample before the flight and 2 samples after, 1 right after, and 1 6 months after. And we do the dose response curves from the samples so we can estimate the received dose. And this is done for us for Canadian Space Agency by Health Canada. So we're working actively with them on this. Now, so for your interest, so this is now example from Dr. Thirsk's mission. His expedition was 2021, and this is what we received from SRAG. So basically, this is the predicted dose for his exposure predictions for his mission, and you can see that it has the upper and lower limit, and there's an action limit which is established at 0.5 rads above the projected exposure range for the mission. After the mission, we get the accumulated dose for the astronauts, and you can see this was for Bob's mission. It's not Bob's personal, this comes from the area monitors that were shown for by Dr. Shaver. So mainly from TBEC in Bob's mission was the main area monitor used, and that gives us the accumulated radiation dose in general for that whole crew who was there from 27th of May until this was actually taken on the 27th of November because that's when Dr. Thirsk was supposed to land, and then it was extended until the 1st of December in the last minute. So this is what we receive, and this may be interesting for you about the biodosimetry results. So this is actually the kind of biodosimetry results we received. This is a combined results from ESA, and we did do ESA analysis for ESA astronauts also until 2017, and these are the dose predictions. So Dr. Thirsk has allowed us to show you his, where is he? He is ABD 10. So you can see he is here, and he's here, and this is actually his predicted, from biodosimetry results, his prediction was 60 milligray, and if you remember, his physical badge read, I think it was 41.3 milligray. So there is, and as Dr. Straube rightfully said, there is the results. We don't use the results, biodosimetry results, for any operational decisions. We're just collecting that as due diligence, collecting that data, and there is an issue of how to interpret that data. And we are in the process of having a large cross-comparison study with NASA, comparing their data from 45 astronauts with our data, and hopefully that gives us some more information how to interpret those results. Now going to some activities we do. I'm mainly presenting one key activity because in our documentation for ISS, characterizing the neutron contribution of crew exposures is a requirement, and that was not met until when ISS RAD was launched, I think 2016. And up to that, we were supporting that effort by using the Canadian-made bubble detector spectrometers, and of course they're only supporting because we can only measure about a week at a time infrequently when we get the crew time. So we were able to get some indication, but of course they were not permanent area detectors that could have been used operationally full time. So basically, this is how the bubble detectors work. There is, they have these liquid droplets, and that then create bubbles when neutrons hit them. And we have flown these, not the spectrometric detectors, but the simple bubble detectors since 1989, and done actually a lot of phantom studies with the Russian Institute of Biomedical Problems. Now, so the plan for the Radiant 2 is, again, so it is a collaboration with the Institute of Biomedical Problems of Russian Academy of Sciences, and the goal is to collect 10 weeks of data in each module and measure a full solar cycle. So we're really looking, so we started here, so Bob Thirsk was the first one to use the neutron spectrometer in his mission 2009. And we're going to actually cover this whole, we're going to finish 2020, cover the whole solar cycle, and then we have a better idea effect of solar cycle on neutron doses. But of course, this is not a very strong solar cycle, but it is what we have. And usually the typical scenarios, we have 6 spectrometric detectors placed on a wall on a given module. And then when we have Canadian astronauts like Robert Thirsk, he wore one on his body and then one was put in his sleeping quarters. And here you can see our astronauts who have flown. Chris Hadfield, Bob Thirsk was the first, and then just recently David St. Jacques. And these are the locations that we are collecting data from over the whole solar cycle. Now, this is an example for you what we see. So this is just showing Bob Thirsk's results from the sessions that were conducted during his mission. And so this is by no means all the results, because we've been collecting them almost 10 years now. But it gives you a very good indication what we're seeing. So the first session conducted in Bob Thirsk mission, that was done in a Russian module, service module. And this actually, he did not wear any detectors on himself. We placed them all near the TPEC, and we were able to see the difference between bubble detectors and the TPEC data. And then it was obviously lower because we are only looking at neutrons. And we could see from that comparing the TPEC, NASA TPEC, and Russian DP8, that 30% of the total dose seems to be neutrons. Then we had the example of the spectrometric data. You can see that these are different modules. So we did that in service module. This is Columbus, this is US Lab, and this is in GEM, the Japanese module. And there's really no significant difference between the values for each module, but we could see that around 40% of neutron doses is due to high energy neutrons over 15 MeV, which is important finding. Now, his personal, this is now considered his personal data. These are results from the detectors that he wore on himself and his sleeping quarters. So he would actually wear one on his pouch around his body and one he put in his sleeping quarters. And these results show that the detector that he wore on himself showed higher values than the one placed in sleeping quarters. And this is assumed to be because the sleeping quarters were more shielded and where he was moving around, and perhaps also suggested to me, researchers, that also because there's also his own body produces neutrons. Now, this is an example of what we call the Thirsk project. We had one more session planned, and Bob sent us an email down from a space station saying he wants to do something different. And I told our Russian partners that we seem to have a different plan, and Dr. Thirsk is proposing something else. And our collaborator, Dr. Surshakov, was saying, this is great. It's great to have astronauts who are interested in what we're doing and want to do some additional studies for us. So we went with Bob's plan. He really wanted to see the effect of water shielding on the radiation and neutron levels. So in one session, he placed the detectors inside the water bags. And then we did another study where he put the detectors on the outer wall, and then one inside on the water, on the other inside wall, inside of the water bag. And this showed us that the water shield reduced the neutron dose rate around 30%, And since then, our Institute of Biomedical colleagues were very excited about this finding and continued these similar studies looking at the effects of water. They had these water napkins, big thick walls of water napkins, and they used our bubble detectors and they got very similar results. So this is thanks to Bob Thirsk's own initiative that this gave us very good information. Now, just very quickly now, this is what we're doing ISS, and now I'm just going to go a few words about what we're doing to missions for Moon and beyond. And first, I have a short slide to show you.
All right. Hi, my name is Jessica Voss, and this is Anne McLean, and we are here today helping the designers of the Orion capsule evaluate the ability to protect their crew from radiation. Radiation, as you know, is really harmful, and so the whole point is for us to get into a really cool little shelter and take all the equipment we have in this capsule and put it over us as best as possible. And we have to make sure it's stowed and that we are safe and we have everything we need in terms of supplies down in this awesome little bay.
Yeah, going to space is hard and going to deep space is harder. And the technologies that we're going to need to successfully get to Mars have been being developed for many years, and it's going to take many tests like this one over many years by a large group of people in order to make that mission successful in the 2030s. So we're excited to get there, and we're working every day toward that goal.
So the point here is that our astronaut Bob Thirsk is an innovator, so he started something that is also to understanding the use of what is involved, what do you have on board. Like Bob was testing the water bags that were already on board and their effectiveness as shielding, and this is also being used in planning for Orion, basically using stowage bags that are already on board, because you can only send so much. The weight and volume is high premium in space, so you try to use what you have. And now, as they mentioned in a previous slide, you need new technologies. I'm not going to go into this, but we are looking at new technologies, supporting concept studies for new technologies for exploration class missions, including a new neutron spectrometer, which would not require any manipulation or interaction by crew members and can measure up to 100 MeV, which could be used for exploration class missions. And we're also looking for smaller fast neutron detectors that could be worn as a personal detectors, and also the DNA dosimetry that will look effects of radiation on naked DNA and turn that into a dose. So these are just very briefly showing that we are looking at, as it was mentioned by the NASA astronauts in the video, we have to look at differently the technologies. We cannot use the same technologies we're using for ISS for exploration. And again, so this is just a really also you have seen that many times, was brought up. But I guess the key thing here is really when we go for radiation limits, this is what we're getting, astronauts are getting now, about 100 to up to 100 millisieverts, and when we go to Mars, that could be 10 times more. And currently, it takes 2 to 3 missions for astronauts to reach their limits. And for us, our astronauts usually fly only one long duration mission, so it's not really been an issue for Canadian astronauts at all. But you can see that when we go to the moon missions, it's 3 times more. When it goes to deep space, near Earth objects, 5 to 6 times more, and of course then Mars at 10 times more. So we're certainly going, and then there's, as we heard, also the effect of solar particle events. So it's clear that we are starting to reach the limits, and we have to look at the radiation limits and the risk framework that we have now. So not just new technologies, but also looking at rethink the whole risk framework and the limits for exploration class mission. And for this, we're doing modeling and risk assessment. We're working with Canadian organizations, including Canadian nuclear laboratories, and understanding the neutron environment better, space radiation environment better, and reviewing the space exploration cancer and non-cancer effects. to be able to, again, work with our international partners to come up with a new radiation protection framework and new limits for exploration class missions. We're also looking at new tools to do this and new projection tools. And we have actually another concept study by Canadian Nuclear Labs of helping us to plan a planning tool. Now, this is my last slide. So basically, I should say, so again, for international partners, you heard that we have worked very closely on the International Space Station among our partners to work together and come up with a radiation framework, protection risk framework, and the limits. And it's the same group had worked within the confine, which is International Working Group on, it's called International System Maturation Team on Radiation, and we've been working since 2016 looking at radiation environment and risk analysis at and near lunar surface. Now, in 2018, the working group initiated collaboration with ICRP to develop a common health risk assessment framework and recommendation on exposure limits for exploration class human spaceflight missions. And as mentioned again previously, ICRP has established a task group 1155 in May 2019, on risk and dose assessment for radiological protection for astronauts. And actually this working group had their first official kickoff meeting here yesterday. So it's a very historical ICRP meeting for everybody. And so this is all I have to say. I thank you very much, and to the moon.
I think I'll allow one really quick question. Thank you everybody for putting your questions in. I'll ask you to carry most of them over to this afternoon's panel discussion. How significant is the cost for addressing radiation risks relative to other physiological or psychological risks for astronauts on mission? How significant is the cost for addressing radiation risks?
The cost in cost in health?
Cost in health?
Or cost in monetary?
Clarification from the audience.
What's that? Radiation protection? Cost, okay. It's, you mean all the framework to do it? Yeah. But this is like, I think this is, this is probably a question for Dr. Sabers, because we are working with SRAC, so Space Radiation Analysis Group is doing that work, most of that work for us actively during the missions. Of course, we are paying for it. We pay for what's called international operating costs. So we are paying for that, but it's not cheap. But it's also it's one of the key concerns we have for ISS and for exploration class missions. So more we know and better we do it, we have to do it. Because we're responsible, as we said, in the end of the day, we're responsible for the health of our astronauts, and this is one of the key potential risks in space exploration.
Okay, thank you very much, Leena.
Thank you, thanks.
I'd now